Be the right club. Be the right club today. Yes!
Again, has to be careful of the speed.
What a comeback season for Hal Sutton.
Come right back toward the hole. Come on in. That's the second eagle he's made it for this week.
17 years later, Hal Sutton is the Players' Champion.
He's got it going right at the flagstick. It'll be up. It is.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Be the Right Club Today podcast. Thanks for joining in. How we had have a good guest on today.
We do. Brad Faxon, one of the best short game artists there is, a really great friend, and he opens up a lot, throws a lot of good information out there for all you listeners.
Yeah, we had a few little issues with our connection. We did our best to clean it up, but there's so many good nuggets in there. We wanted to get it out to you anyway. So go ahead and listen in and enjoy Brad Faxon. All right, I'm honored to welcome our next guest to the Be the Right Club Today podcast. 8-time PGA Tour winner. He's a 2-time Ryder Cupper, known as one of the best putters to ever play the game, and he's also working with a lot of the best players on tour right now, Mr. Brad Faxon. Brad, welcome to our podcast. How are you today?
Thanks, Chase. I'm doing great. Hal, always great to be with you too.
Brad, it's great to have you on, and I'm curious about your ideas on a lot of things right now that's going on. You're commentating as well as teaching. So how are you filling your time right now? What are you doing? Tell everybody.
Well, Hal, I'm turning 60 later on this year. I remember you and I were maybe 3 years apart in school.
Welcome to 60.
I went to a small school in Greenville, South Carolina called Furman that I had never heard of before growing up in Rhode Island. And then in 1980, or maybe it was the fall of 79, we went to play a tournament in Georgia at the University of Georgia's course in Athens. And I saw this name, Hal Sutton, at Centenary, which I had never heard of either. And it goes back a long way when I first saw you and how good you were as a player and your team was in the competition we faced then. But fast forward to today, gosh, I can't imagine how long that's been. I haven't really played a whole lot. I was doing some broadcasting for the Fox Sports, but we were covering all the USGA's events. And I loved doing that. I had played a little bit sparingly on the Champions Tour for 5 or 6 years, and then got into TV, and then kind of this coaching thing, performance, I don't know what you call it really, mentoring, kind of fell into my lap 3 years ago, almost to the day when I met Rory McIlroy.
So, Brad, I got a question for you and Hal that I've always been fascinated about. Hal's known as one of the best ball strikers to really ever play the game. You're known as one of the best putters to ever play the game. How did we get here? Is it the golf course you guys grew up on? Is it the circumstances you were dealt with? Is it we talk about being a learned behavior? Were you kind of born with some of the skills? Like, what are your thoughts on these great ball strikers versus these great putters versus a Seve who has a great short game? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question, Chase, and I'd love to hear Hal's thoughts on this. But I know that how I grew up really helped me to become a golfer, particularly short game player. And there were a couple factors. Where I grew up in the Northeast, it was a seasonal game. We didn't play golf 12 months a year. But when we did play a lot of times on the fringe season, we held elements. We had wind. We were on the house, played Rhode Island Country Club in our CBS Charity Classic where I grew up. I was a caddy at 12 or 13 years old, so I learned to read greens when I was young. I think that the courses I grew up on had a lot of pitch from back to front. Donald Ross was, in Rhode Island, in New England a lot early in his life when he built so many of these great courses like Wannamoisett and many others in that area. But I never remembered having a 4-foot putt that was inside the hole. Nothing was straight. We were always playing lots of breaks, and I think that helped kind of maybe that creative side. But I would believe when somebody says to me, boy, you're lucky you were born a good putter, that's a big insult. That ticks me off. That makes me think like, well, I didn't work hard. I didn't get better at this. And if I showed somebody statistics for my just putting in particular, when I got on the PGA Tour, my putting stats got better as I got into my 30s and 30 to 40 really, which is opposite what most people believe. So I worked pretty hard at it. I worked hard at it physically. I worked hard at it mentally. And I was able to forget, when I had a bad day with that part of the game. The other part of the game didn't come as easy. I was curious. I went and saw many instructors, too many instructors. But I also loved every time I was around a player like Hal, being able to watch or at least ask questions to the best players in the world.
I agree with you. I think our environment had a great deal to do with the player that we were. We spend a lot of time learning how to play the game before we know whether we're any good or not, and the environment that we're in is helping create the player that we become. Excuse me.
How do you think it's there's an artistic side? Like, were you as artistic? Brad, were you more of an artist? Is this short game, the putting, the skill of that, does it lean to more of, this imaginative side versus ball striking being a little bit more on the engineer side? What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Brad.
Okay, well, again, growing up, Hal talked about the environment. This place, Rhode Island, where I spent a lot of time as a kid, was one of the few courses in the New England area that had a driving range. The members could go down and hit balls, and they had a green that you could hit shots into. And back then, before there were lawyers and lawsuits, you could go out on the end of the range and hit back in towards this green. And it was always windy. The green was small. There was a bunker there. And as a young guy, I didn't want to pick the balls up with a picker. I wanted to chip them close to the hole. So I was missing a lot of greens back then as a little kid, and I just chipped them towards the hole. So I spent hours, thousands of hours, chipping balls, bunker shots. My favorite thing, especially when I was a caddy, when I wasn't a member at this club, caddies got to play on Mondays. They got to play it later in the afternoons, run around 6 holes. Our rules back then, our parenting rules were, hey, you come home when the street lights come on. And I would stay there till dark every day and have matches with my friends, competitions with my friends. And it wasn't structured. We didn't have, from 5 to 6, you're going to putt 4-footers. We didn't have that in our lives. It was just come up with ways to challenge yourself and play little matches and play the game. And I still think that should be the spirit of the game. And I see a real departure from that today with a lot of the modern teachers, psychologists, coaches, whatever you call them.
I would agree. Structures become a lot of what everybody thinks should be taught. And I believe that the artistic side of the game, the enjoyment of the game, comes from no structure, really, but a deep desire. That's what you and I both possessed as we were growing up, was a deep desire to get better. And, no one can give you that. That may be the one thing we're born with, is a deep desire to succeed and at something, and we chose golf. What's the difference between today's players and when you and I played, Brad?
It's really an interesting topic. I was out yesterday at the Honda Classic, a Tuesday practice round, and certainly during the COVID, the pandemic, players don't do Monday outings. They don't, they all have to get tested before they go to a site. So when the player shows up now, they have to get tested. They have to wait an hour and a half for the result. There's nothing to do on a Monday corporately anyway. So the players have a lot more time on the range. And I was blown away having gone to 3 consecutive events in a row at Bay Hill at the Players and watching, and we've talked about this on TV. It's not really new, but players now have a team with them. It's a we mentality rather than a me or an I mentality. Hal, you and I started it as a player and a caddy. We certainly might have had somebody that helped us with our swing or helped us how to think, or, we had our wives with us. We didn't call that really a team now. And I see players playing practice rounds on their own. They would have swing coach, mental coach, their caddy. Sometimes a trainer goes out there and works with a player. It seems like it's a lot. Every player now is carrying either a TrackMan or a Foresight quad, some kind of launch monitor that can measure how far a ball's going at 7 in the morning when you first tee off, or 1 o'clock in the afternoon when it warms up, and they know it has atmospheric conditions. I mean, things that we never really thought about that you just intuitively figured out. When you looked up at a green that was above you, you knew you'd play at 4 or 5 extra yards. They now have it to 6.8 yards. They have systems on how to read greens, how aim point, measure with your feet. Again, something we did intuitively. It's incredible. And if we went back in time to Snead and Hogan before they really had video to watch, would they have used that technology? Probably. Would they have used it as much or depend upon it as much?
I think those are all great points. I think it is a lot different. This is what I'll say right here. I'm not sure the best players in the world today are any better than the best players in the world were then. But I do think the 125th best player is better than the 125th best player of our era. And I don't know why I say that, other than technology has allowed players that probably wouldn't have been as good to get a lot better. But that's my opinion.
Thoughts, Brad?
Chase, Hal's right. When the World Wide Web was created, information was easily obtainable anywhere worldwide. Players growing up could watch videos of Hal hitting shots, Seve hitting pitch shots, chip shots. Instructors now can post anything on their websites. It's easy to get information. I met a Korean golfer last year at the U.S. Women's Open who was number 1 or 2 in the world, Jin Young Ko, and she said she watched videos of me putting when she was 8 or 9 years old in Korea. But that wouldn't have been possible when Hal and I were playing, and really we would have, ours was more word of mouth. We would have had to ask another player a particular question, and players then would always share their feelings or their thoughts about how they did something, what they felt. And I know, like, Peter Jacobson was one of our good friends, how he was amazing at always having a swing thought that he would share with the rest of the world that we should all do together. That was how we were taught or raised from some people. But I think the technology is a good thing. I think the other thing we haven't talked about is all the statistics that are out there from ShotLink, from when that started in the early 2000s. And players now hire people to work with data analytics, logistics, whatever. And they can look at portions or parts of their game, and even the subset of putting. What part of putting do they need to improve the most, whether it's inside 5 feet, the birdie range is from 6 to 18 feet, or then outside of that. And they can say, if I spend a little bit more time in this area, I can improve the most amount of strokes per round to get more competitive. We didn't have that.
Al, thoughts?
Well, you're bringing me to a point that I was going to ask later, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it right now. These stats and everything else are teaching us how to be a little bit better on each part of our game. But I think Sunday was a great reminder for me of how little people are playing to win today. On Sunday afternoon, at the end of the day, there was one guy that aimed it at the flag on 17, and that was Harmon. And he hit it 6 feet, made the putt for birdie, and positioned himself differently. When I won the TPC the first time, I was 6 players tied for the lead. And I hit it 6 inches on Sunday afternoon on 17 that separated myself because I was trying to hit it close. I was trying to win the tournament. The second time I won, I had a 1-shot lead. So the right play for me to win the tournament was to hit it into the middle of the green. Tiger was 1 shot behind me, and he never looked away from the pin. He looked right at the pin and hit it right at the pin. because he didn't care about second place. He was trying to win the tournament. He's made that known the entire time he played golf. I'm playing to win. I'm not playing to finish second. I have a point that I want to make about that. He's won more tournaments than anybody, and he's made more money than anybody. So I'm not sure playing safe to make money will turn you into the best player in the world. What do you think, Brad?
I love that. I remember when I was a young player playing down in Doral, and Greg Norman would often fly down to play in that tournament by helicopter from his house. That was an hour and a half to hour and 45-minute drive. So he wanted to stay at home. He had this helicopter, and there were a lot of players who were extremely jealous of that, of the ability he had to fly a helicopter, land maybe in the driving range. And they would say, well, if I had a helicopter, I'd aim at flag sticks too. And I was like, wait a minute. The reason why he has a helicopter is because he aimed at flag sticks. You know, he wasn't afraid to fire it at a flag when he needs. Blown away, Hal, on Sunday. How about how many players on Sunday, you know, that flag was 140-something yards. They were hitting sand wedge to that green. And first of all, I don't know if the sand wedge was a 52-degree sand wedge, you know, a gap wedge. I'm sure it wasn't a 60-degree lob wedge, but the only play they had with sand wedge was left of that bunker towards the middle and towards the front of the green. And like you said, there were too many players that ended up on that shelf when they should have been firing the right at that flag. And well, it's an intimidating shot. When you're standing on that tee and you see that flag stick right at that bunker, the wind was right to left, and for a right-handed player, maybe it's harder to cut that shot in there. But I don't know. I think there's a time when you got to just man up, and certainly Justin Thomas did what you did. He had the luxury of aiming away from that flag, but then he had to make a 6-footer maybe for par there on a green that looked like it was a little bit chewed up. So that's an exciting tournament. I mean, what you did to win there twice, Hal, be the right flag today, be the right club today. I mean, we hear it every single time you turn on the PGA Tour radio or watch some kind of promo of the PGA Tour.
Well, it was an exciting day for me, obviously, but you know, I think the all-exempt tour has created a little of not playing for winning. And, you know, guys, there's so much money involved, and, you know, they make huge livings now. I mean, they make a lot more than you and I did when we were out there. And, I mean, I'm not jealous of that. I mean, I think you and I played a part in them being able to play for that kind of money today. So, I mean, you know, a long time ago, Byron Nelson told me, this is a really cool story. You know, I was working with him when I was a rookie on the tour, and he invited me over to Preston Trails, and he said, Hal, he said, I want to watch you hit a few balls. So I hit balls for a few minutes, and we went in and we sat down, and it was after the tour was over with that year. And he's got tears running down his cheek, you know, and I said, what's wrong, Mr. Nelson? He said, nothing at all. He said, these are tears of joy. And he said, Hal, he said, you know, I helped you this last year, and you finished 11th on the money list and was Rookie of the Year. And he said, you won more money. You won $245,000. And that's more money than I made my entire career. And he said, I felt like I had something to do with the tour getting that far along, and I had something to do with you getting that far along. So these are tears of joy. So we have those tears of joy, you and I do, because, you know, we walked those fairways for a lot of years and helped build the image that the PGA Tour currently has. And, you know, I take pride in that, and I know you do too. And, you know, I'm excited to see where the guys have gone with their game. I'd love to see people play for wins more. You know, I could be Lee Westwood for a second and be on that tee on 17. He's never won a major. He's won not very much in the United States at all. Won a lot of money, won a lot of tournaments around the world. Now's my moment, and I'm going to aim it at the middle of the green. Maybe he pulled it. I don't know. I have my doubts about that, but you got to aim it at that flag right there. He didn't need the money. He needed the win.
That's gold right there, Hal. And I respect Lee Westwood at 47 years old to be back-to-back weeks right there with a chance to win. And I'm sure, or I hope it bugs him a little bit, but that was a shot I know you would have taken right at the flag. And if you hit it in the water, you could go to bed at night thinking, okay, at least I got it going. But I think too, these players are influenced by so many factors. Like you said, there's tremendous amount of money out there, and players' world rankings determine a lot of their bonus structures and their contracts too. I don't know what you're thinking about on that 17th tee. If you can get in there and finish second, and at the Players, that's the world's strongest field they'll play every year. That'll move any player up a lot in the rankings. Maybe you don't want to take a chance. Maybe you like to win $1.5 million and not, or whatever. 2.7 was for first. I don't know what second place was. A lot. It's hard not to think about that. And again, I like the intensity Justin Thomas has. When you watch him, you can see that will inside of his body just emanating out of there. It looks like he wants to win. He gets angry, which I think good players have always done, but he can come back from those emotions when he doesn't hit a good shot. He 3-putted twice early in the round, and he just found a way. And the great players all did that.
Brad, I'm going to segue a little bit into back to putting, and I got a question that I'm really interested in your take on. We talk a lot here with our young players that we work with. When they start to develop and get better as ball strikers, a lot of times we warn them that their putting could tend to struggle a little bit because they're going to miss a lot more what they would consider makeable putts. Now with strokes gained and with shot link and with all the stats we have, we can see the percentages of 50% from 8 feet and all those numbers. But have you found that with some of the players you've worked with that, we'll mention Rory, a guy that hits it as good as he does. He's going to have a lot of 10-footers for birdie that, it's hard. You mentioned you had a short memory at times, which is needed out there. And it's hard when you see a lot of these putts that you think is makeable. You hit 14, 15 greens around, you're going to miss a lot more putts than if you hit 2 or 3 greens around and chip it to 3 feet and you think you're a world beater. So what are your thoughts on that?
Interestingly, when we started off, how the stat we could look at was putts per round. That's the only stat we had. And then as we advanced further, we had a station, and then shot link came around, and all of a sudden we had putts from every single foot out there. We knew if they were for par or for birdie, if there was an importance to the putt. Did players putt better when they were outside the cut or inside the cut? Why do they make putts for par more than they make putts for birdie? So anytime I have a player that asks me for help around the greens, there's way more than what the stroke looks like. It's never just path and face. It's, how do you think? How do you process? What's your routine look like? What's your acceptance afterwards like? Those are the things that you have to get into with any player. And those questions are answered differently a lot of times from different players. And McIlroy, when I met him 3 years ago, had looked like when he was putting, he was reading an instructional list or a to-do list on how to do it. It was like he looked slow. He didn't look like it was natural for him. And he may be one of the most gifted players we've ever seen in the history of the game. How he can swing a golf club and batter that ball off the tee. It was the first tournament in at least 3 years for him where he putted better or chipped better or scored better than he did hit the ball from tee to green. I'm reminded constantly when I hear any player say, I don't have my A game, at Tiger's statements. And this was in 96, 97 when we were first learning who Tiger Woods was, that he could win in multiple ways, where he didn't have to hit it great to win. He didn't have to putt great to win. He found a way. And that's important. And it's a discussion really than it is something you're going to find in a studio on a computer. And I love that part about it. And how, I love that there's I have a couple players I'm working with, one that tries too hard, that gets in his own way, works as hard as anybody. And then I have some players that I need to kick them in the rear end a little bit. Why aren't you trying harder more? The dichotomy is incredible. And I know everybody's different, but I wish I had an answer to all those questions, Hal.
Every golfer's out there wishing that one of us could give them the answer to those questions out there. We were seekers forever. We were trying to figure those answers out. And, you know, they still are today. That's the great part of the game. That's why we love the game, is because people are trying to figure that out. You know, you brought up Rory. Let's talk about him for a minute. You know, here lately, I've been on a bunch of podcasts, and they talk about what's wrong with Rory. And, you know, I always am baffled when people say that, because, you know, he's certainly one of the most, as you mentioned, one of the most talented players ever. And, you know, he's been playing good. He's not winning as much as everybody thinks he ought to be winning. And, you know, we could probably attribute that to a lot of things. I don't know his game quite as well as you know his game, but one of the things that I think has really been bothering Rory is he's been listening to everybody else and reading too much. And I don't know this for a fact, but, you know, I went through a period where everybody didn't think I was living up to their expectations either. And I began to look at what everybody was saying, hoping that I could figure something out of what they were saying that might make me a better player. And I think Rory has done that. And then at the same time, Bryson has been chasing distance, and the world is talking about it. I mean, he's become the player that everybody's focused on right now, which could take some of the pressure off of Rory, but instead, Rory got caught up in the whirlwind, as he said this last week. You know, what are your thoughts on all this? You're closer to him.
It's a great topic. I think that for Bryson, Tiger changed a lot of players' mindsets on how to get better, and I think he hurt players, and namely Colin Montgomery, who dominated in Europe. I don't think he ever seemed to play as well as again. It almost, you know, put his head down when Tiger started to get as good as he was. I think he affected Ernie Els. I think Tiger affected, you know, Phil and VJ, maybe to work harder, maybe to change too much of their games. But Bryson's, what he's done that's been so remarkable in this this mission to chase speed and chase distance, he started going after long drive guys. And when we played Hal early on, it was, if you were a long hitter, it didn't necessarily mean you were a great player. We always thought that if you were tall or big, you might not be able to be a good putter. There were very few George Archers, you know, Phil Blackmars that could, Phil Dan Forsmans that were tall that could be good at short game. And now all of a sudden you have a guy like Bryson DeChambeau that's gained 30 or 40 pounds. That's, you know, I think he was a long hitter to begin with, but now he's on a quest to be like Kyle Berkshire or Jamie Sadlowski, and then still be able to chip and putt. So now you've seen a lot of players, and I live down here where Rory lives, Justin lives, Dustin lives, and they have their TrackMans out there. Every once in a while they have speed contests. How fast can I get that club head? How fast can I get that ball going? And our generation, you know, we had a few guys that could hit it 10 or 20 yards farther, not guys that could hit it 50 or 60 yards farther. And Rory, what makes him so popular is he's brutally honest. Not many players would admit publicly like he did that, hey, look, I might have been, you know, going down the wrong road trying to chase Bryson. And I've seen him on that range hit that ball, you know, when that ball speed got to 190, I'm like, holy smokes, Rory's 5'9", you know, he only weighs 160 pounds, but he's gained a lot of weight in the last year working out and trying to find ways to keep up his speed. I think from what you've read and I've listened to is as he's gone on this chase for distance, it affected his iron play. And when you look at the columns on where do you need to improve that approach game, that iron shots from 150 to 200 yards, and even for Rory inside of 150, he knows that slipped. And I get angry when I hear players or people say he doesn't want it hard enough. I'm like, wait a minute, this guy's won 18 tournaments in the U.S. He's won 4 majors. He's only 31 years old. He certainly wants it enough. And he missed the cut at the Players Championship, got home late Friday night and hit balls for 5 hours on Saturday. A lot of players, especially top players, might take that day off to relax. He was on the range the next day for 5 hours, Monday, 5 hours. He is not a guy that is quitting or trying to just take time off because of this. He knows what he has to do, and he knows it through his own feelings, which I like the most, through his ball striking, his caddy statistics. I think there's a lot more for Rory McIlroy and he's out of the top 10 now in the world ranking. It's pissed him off. I think you're going to see a motivated Rory McIlroy in the next few months.
Thoughts?
Well, I think, I pull for Rory. I think he's a great guy. I think that I love his golf swing and his attitude. I do think he plays to win. I mean, it looks like he's got all oars in the water trying to win golf tournaments. Some of his mistakes are because he's trying to win golf tournaments. But, I wish him the best. I've defended him in many ways on other podcasts. People don't know what it's like to be, titled the next somebody. That means that you have some basis like Jack Nicklaus or Tiger Woods, and we expect you to be that. Well, that's a tremendous pressure to put on someone. And, I think Rory's doing a really good job of battling that. And I know he's got a new daughter, and I know that always gave all of us, a reason, a will, a point to do something more. So good luck, Rory.
That's for sure. It's interesting. I got lucky when I met Rory. He won the next week at Bay Hill on my father's birthday, my father's 80th birthday. It was kind of cool to see that. So we're celebrating that again this week in the Faxon household. But strategy is an important thing now. I saw Steve Stricker yesterday in the parking lot at Steve's 52 years old on the senior tour as well. Respected player, and one of the players I've been helping, a guy named Ben on, young Korean player, getting close to 30, great hitter of the ball, tee to green. Stricker told me a story about on playing at Bay Hill earlier this month, and on the 18th hole they were playing on Sunday. It was windy, into the wind. Ben had been hitting the ball well that day and had a second shot in with a 6-iron to that notoriously difficult flag stick on the right side over the water, very shallow green. And Stricker wanted to tell me Ben should have hit this ball out to the left, where everybody does, chance the 2-putt and just get a 4 and get out of there. And Ben hit this shot too hard into the back bunker and it plugged. I was listening to Steve, just trying to take his opinion, not having seen the shot. It wasn't on television. And Ben had, from that downhill lie plugged towards the water downwind, not really a shot. He could have hit it way out to the right and had a 90-footer for a par. And he tried to chip it and keep it in the bunker and then get it up and down from there. But he flew it too far, went in the water. He made a double bogey. The Stricker shouldn't have done that. And when I saw Ben and his caddy, I said, what was your situation like on Sunday at Bay Hill? He goes, I just hit a 4-iron in the 17, didn't reach the green. It was howling windy. I was in 30th place. He said, I wanted to test my game. I wanted to see if I could hit a good shot, and go at a flag stick that maybe I wouldn't have, but I didn't care that I would finish 29th or 35th, or that I'd make, 20,000 instead of 15,000. I wanted to hit a good shot. And I respect that, Hal. I thought that was, maybe it wasn't a percentage play, but I think you go away the next week having learned something to keep in your memory bank.
That's exactly the point that I was making earlier, and I'm glad you made that point. Winning is a mindset. And if you back away from winning, and I did it, you did it, it's easy to back away. It's like speeding in a car. You're speeding, you first start speeding, your heart starts racing, and then you speeding for a little while, you think, man, I got to slow this down or I'm going to have a wreck or whatever. I respect Tiger because he sped his whole life and he never backed away. And the easiest thing to do is to back away from trying to win. And once you back away once and you hit it in the middle of the green, you're successful, and maybe you make a 30-footer that you kind of got away with that. You begin to think, well, maybe that's a smarter play to play in the future. And all of a sudden, the mindset becomes a more conservative approach. It's much harder to get back into going for a flag.
Let's talk about that, because there's a lot of teachers out there now, or instructors or data guys that would tell a player there's a percentage play that you got to play smart, which is an interesting topic. I'll go back to the first time I won a tournament, an official tournament on the PGA Tour. It was the 91 Buick Open. And Billy Andrade, who was a Rhode Island guy that had won back-to-back Kemper and Westchester. He was a few years younger than me, and I felt like I was equally as talented, maybe a better player. And I had been kind of like a journeyman my first 7 years on the tour. When am I going to win, really? When am I going to win? And Billy's wins kind of kicked me in the ass a little bit. And playing the final 9, I was playing a good round. I got to the 13th hole, this par 5. Flag was in the top right, water front, water right, big tier there. And I had a 3-iron. And I was not a great long iron player ever. It was a little bit of a downhill lie. A lot could go wrong here. And I remember how I had those brand new Titleist DCIs. It was still a prototype set. But I said to myself, I've got a 3-iron here, and it's time to hit a shot at the flagstick and suffer the consequences if you don't make a good swing. But I remember hitting this 3-iron and having to take off right at the flag, eagle, and from well over 200 yards. And that was maybe the life, eagle the hole, but I buried that. I chipped back in the playoff and had about a 6-footer for a par to win the 10th hole in the playoff, chipped it 3-putted. And this one English player I work with, Tom Lewis, we were talking about this yesterday. He goes, I don't feel comfortable in these certain situations. And I'm going, boy, Tom, you can't wait till you're comfortable. I was nervous as a cat there on 13th hole with this 3-iron. I had this 6-footer. It's literally to change your life, to get exempt, to get into the Masters, to have all these things happen. And you got to suck it up. You got to man up. And I remember being as nervous as I could be, couldn't feel my hands as I made the stroke. And then when you watched it on video, all my friends go, how do you look so relaxed? I'm like, I wasn't. But that was a great memory for me, and it's a great teaching point going.
Hal?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We all reach those moments where we've got to make a decision, and the decision is not always what club to hit or what break to play. The decision is, am I going to take this chance? Do I want to win? Do I want this moment to be my moment? And, those are the things that are hard to quantify. We're spending our whole life quantifying everything. We got data for this and data for that, but there is nothing that points that moment out to you other than your own self. And, a lot of players are missing that. And, I have a great deal of respect for Bob Rotella, as you do. But those are things that you felt and I felt, and you might have told Bob Rotella about it. I might have told Bob Rotella about it. But, Nicklaus could give people a lot of information because he was there a lot of times. Tiger could give people a lot of information because he was there a lot of times. We need that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why you're doing what you're doing, because we love the game and we're trying to make a difference. We're trying to help the future. And that's why I wanted you on the podcast, because I respect what you're doing.
Well, thanks, Hal. And I absolutely respect what you're doing. I love every day seeing something you say on Twitter that seems to make sense in every situation that any player would have. And I was one of the first players that worked with Bob Rotella back in the mid-'80s. And there's a great chapter on Padraig Harrington when he won his 3 major championships. If you look at statistics, right? The statistics will say when you hit a 3-iron and you have 200 yards and you have water, and you should be aiming to the left. You should use your shot dispersion or your spray pattern or whatever they want to call that, and play away from flags. And in Padraig, he said, look, I understand when there's a shot that's a smart shot, whatever that is, but I wanted to hit committed shots. And he said, I found out a lot of times when I hit a shot that wasn't right where I wanted to be, maybe I short-sided myself on a tough hole, but when I was in a good mindset like that, I often got up and down. I hit a miracle flop shot, or I made a 30-footer for par when I wasn't supposed to. But that's what great players always seem to come up with. And all these stats that you look at and you can see, and players and statisticians tear them apart. What they don't show is how were you thinking over those shots? What was your mindset? If you're looking at what how close do you hit your 6-iron from 185 or 90 yards, in some cases 220 yards now. Maybe it doesn't say you should hit it at the flagstick, but how many times when you were in this, a state of mind where you said, I got a green light here, I feel great about this, I know this is going straight. How are you supposed to play away from the flag net? I don't get that.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. Obviously, and I'm sure you've met Scott. We've mentioned kind of decade and Scott Fawcett a little bit as far as the strategy and what the stats say and stuff. And Hal and I have spent some time with Scott and definitely would consider us, friends, and we believe some of it for sure. Do you guys think that it's like a system like that is better for young players? Is it better for guys just getting out there to make sure they're not flying at every flag? I mean, there has to be a little bit of a balance, but I completely agree with you guys. Like, if you're feeling it, and if it's time to, a situation where, it's a career defining situation, and sometimes we got to take on some of that risk. How do we balance that out?
Yeah, I've never met Scott Fawcett. I know about Scott through Twitter and Decade. I actually got in a little bit of a spat with him on the internet, which I hate doing. But he has a lot of players keep their own statistics while they play, especially, junior golfers and college golfers that don't have, a shot link system that keeps track of all their shots. But I thought it incredible that he would want a player to write down as they walk off a green that I missed a 6-footer. Like, you already don't know that, or that's going to help you later that you've written that down on the 14th hole. To me, I would argue vehemently that I'm sure Hal and I, if we went out and played 18 holes and then went in and had lunch and sat down, we could go over every single shot each one of us hit. You would remember that. You might not know that it was exactly 6 feet or 20 feet, but I mean, I think Scott would have players pacing off a putt or a chip for how long it was so you could file it later on and write that down for your stat. I'll argue with them until the cows come in that that's not a great thing to do. And again, I think that the concept of hitting towards the fat of the green is not new at all. Players knew intuitively that when a flag was sticking out there on the right, maybe a better play is to hit it towards the middle of the green and wait till some of those putts go in. Nicholas said that a lot. I've hit in major championships a lot of shots in middles of greens. I don't think that's earth-shattering. But I also have seen a lot of good shots where Jack Nicklaus might have hit it to 2-iron on the 17th hole at Pebble Beach in 1972. I think it hit the flagstick. He wasn't aiming out to the right. So, yeah, it's a great topic. But there are times when you just know a shot's going to go straight before you hit it. And if you wanted to define confidence in golf, isn't that the feeling that you're going to make the putt before you hit it, that it's going in the fairway, you can swing as hard as you can, it's not going to go to the left. I love that part of the game. I love that feeling, and everybody's had it for a moment, and it's getting every player to think better by percentage points throughout the day, throughout the week, and throughout the year.
So, Brad, interesting. If there was a 15th club in the bag, but it couldn't be in the bag, would you say mindset and your gut feeling is the 15th club?
Well, without a doubt. I know Rotella wrote about that. Justin Ray, who does all the stats for me when I look at a player's record, his stat company, the 15th Club, they know that, and it's a mindset that you have to live off the golf course as well. I mean, I can get on a putting green with a player, and I had a player come to see me that says I putt better when I think about more stuff, when I take more time, when I watch my putter go back, when it's a tournament. Everybody says I putt better when it's practice, when I'm with my friends, it's in the Pro-Am, it doesn't matter as much. Most to all say the same thing. And how do you get your brain, your mind, to do that in the competition when the flag goes up? And the other topic that's so fascinating to me now is block versus random practice. Block practice, you get a bunch of balls and you just whack, 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 whack. maybe working on some feel, but not really going through a routine and a process. And then there's this idea that randomness, you got to hit different shots to different targets. You got to be more creative. Look, that's not new either. We would have competitions with ourselves, how to hit shots at flags on the practice tee, or hit a chip shot high or a chip shot low. But most of the time players, and I know Freddie Couple said this too, he could often think, or we would often think of a course you played a lot where you're very comfortable. I had a particular hole at Rhode Island Country Club, the 12th hole, which was a dogleg right. And I always seemed to hit a nice fade there. A lot of times when I hit a fade on a tour course in the tournament, I would think about the 12th hole and think about these shots that I hit. And that reminded me of when I was a kid, or the freedom or ease that I would swing without steering or guiding. And those things I've heard other athletes say, whether they were baseball pitchers or, a tennis player. And I think this idea that you have to have this structured, random practice, it bugs me a little bit. It makes me worried that if you're not as good as you are in a tournament, why are you trying to make things continue to be a tournament? Why don't you make when you're fun? That's the biggest challenge right now I see with so many players.
So let's talk about putting for a minute. You're the best putter I ever watched putt. So you practiced a lot. You've already alluded to that. It's not something you were born with. It's something that you developed. You said your best putting was in your 30s. How'd you do that? I'll
tell you, Hal, I had two kind of, I guess my putting career, statistically, it would certainly show that. And again, we all tried to ask the best players questions, the best people at a certain part of the game questions, whether it was putting and Ben Crenshaw, or driving a golf ball, Jack Nicklaus hit an iron shot, I remember seeing Crenshaw after he'd won his first Masters. I was in Orlando at Disney World. It was a Tuesday afternoon. A friend of mine, named Proctor in English, worked for Ledbetter. He wanted to video Crenshaw's putting. And I knew him a little bit, but I didn't know him really. I didn't think well enough to say, hey, can my friend Gary here video your stroke? But I walked up to him. He knew who I was, but Mr. Crenshaw, can my friend Gary video your stroke? I'm interested. And Crenshaw said, sure, no problem. He goes, I'm actually not putting well right now. And, he had his trusty old Wilson 8802 putter. We were like, man, how can Ben Crenshaw admit to us he's not putting well? And he said something that was sort of esoteric, like, I'm hitting at it, not through it. We didn't really know how to describe what did that mean. And I go, what do you do when you don't feel right when you're hitting at it? What do you do to feel like you're hitting through it? And he goes, well, I've always felt like I putted my best when I made my backstroke longer than my follow through, and that I let or allow my head and my knees to move when I putt. And the sound you hear was the dropping of Gary Smith's camera when he heard a top player say, I allow my head and my knees to move. And when you watched Ben putt, there was some kind of freedom there that you were envious of or jealous of, that you go, I wish I could carry that with me all the time. And there was a young player that just walked on the putting green named John Houston, who had a reputation as being a great Bermuda grass putter. Of course, at Disney, it was Bermuda grass. He goes, watch John Houston when he putts, just watch his knees. They don't stay still. And Houston didn't know what we were talking about, and dropped 3 balls. He putted these 3 30-footers, and there was this little bit of play, It didn't look locked. And from that moment on, I said to myself, oh my gosh, this is going to carry with me an ability to feel a little bit more tension-free. And everybody now is trying to make players a perfect setup where they don't let anything move. They're taking their small muscles out. It's like, let's use big muscles. And when we were watching great short game players, Hubert Green, Raymond Floyd, Crenshaw, Seve, Olafable, we admired them because they had great hands and they had great touch and they had great feel. Never did you try to take that away. And I see that now with the pandemic of chipping. Like, what are we doing, not allowing people to use their hands and their fingers, really? I mean, you pick up something off the table with a coin and you pick it up with your fingertips. That was one of the lessons I learned from Crenshaw. And then when I first saw my stroke on video with Scotty Cameron. He had this studio in a garage out somewhere in north of San Diego, and he was starting to learn, but he had slow motion cameras that watched the putter, and they watched it from down the line and from face on. And I had this stroke that went a little bit straighter back than it should and kind of came over the top a little bit. I'm not making it sound like it was a big deal, but it didn't have a clean transition. And we worked on that a lot. And I tried to arc my stroke a little bit better. That was the first time I had really made conscious changes in the physical parts of the stroke, the path. And I got better after that. And if I showed you a chart of my putting stats, those 2 times, they were 6 years apart, 7 years apart. I had a giant leap in my statistics. So one of them was kind of like a lesson from a player that how did you apply that? One of them was like something I had to really make a change at. I often went to Scotty's to look at this video, but rarely did I putt better the day I got out of there. You know, it took a little bit of time before that work was subconscious enough where I didn't have to think about it.
You know, Brad, one of the things you said that we talk about a lot and I love is, you know, chipping with your fingers or putting with your fingers. You know, it's like I make the analogy, go sign your name on a chalkboard. Would you use your pivot? Would you use your, you know, your stomach, your hips, your shoulders? No, you'd sit here and write it with your hands and write it with your fingers. And we talk a lot about short game, and that's chipping, and that's another topic that we could get into a little bit deeper later. But I love that analogy. I think that's gold. What's one mistake amateurs make that you've seen or two that you would love to fix for everybody putting?
Hal alluded to this a little bit earlier, that everybody wants to get better without having to work hard. That's become our society, our culture, that it's instant gratification. I tell everybody, you know, if you could go buy a can of better chipping and, you know, on the shelf of a CVS, people would go for that. And I get questions, how do you read a green? What's the best way what's one thing you could do to tell me to be a better putter? And I always say, look, time. You need to spend time doing this. And for a player that is a recreational golfer that's a 10 or 12 handicap, the real questions are, do you really want to be better, or do you just want to play golf and enjoy it? Because if you want to get better at it, you got to spend more time, and you got to spend time in that specific part of the game. And most people aren't willing to do that. A lot of them just don't have the luxury to be able to do that. But I think you got to spend some real time doing it. And a lot of times when you get to an elite level, maybe it's not the time spent hitting more putts than it is how you think. But for the average golfer, well, I would say you need to spend more time, and you got to learn to spend time around the hole 4 or 5 feet away and make a lot of those putts, but also learn, how to read a green. And that, again, is something that's a little bit of an art. And now people are showing the ways that there's sciences. I saw a chart Bryson DeChambeau uses called vector putting. And I mean, if I showed it to you, I don't think you and I could understand it, Hal, but he has a formula based on slope of the greens, distance away, and how many inches each putt will break based on the speed of the greens. And it's beyond aim point. It's beyond anything I've ever seen. And he has his chart in his yardage book. And that's why he takes so long to read these greens. How we often see Bryson run from one shot to the next because he wants to be so prepared. I could show it to you from my phone, but I can't wait to see your face, Hal. If you haven't seen the chart, have you seen the vector putting chart?
I have not seen it, no.
I had an NBC guy who was following one of the last groups around, showed me this chart. That's what it looks like. And it has green speeds, it has inches, and he's looking at this when he's on every green. It's remarkable that you would trust a book more than you would trust your eyes and your feet.
Yeah, that is remarkable. I got one more question for you, Brad, and then we'll bring this to an end. There's a lot of yips out there, both you mentioned a minute ago, the pandemic and chipping yips, and people yipping putts and everything else. My personal opinion is we're so result oriented instead of, technique or just using your feel. And, I remember when I was just trying to chip it on the green, that was easy to do, but all of a sudden now I got to chip it across the bunker to a green that's rolling 13. That's hard. And I've got no green to work with. That becomes much more difficult. And what's your feelings on the yips? How would you cure them?
Yeah, I don't know if I could be able to cure somebody's yips. I think I could get them feeling better about themselves a variety of different ways. When I started playing the game, I didn't know what bounce was. I didn't know what angle of attack was. I knew I could open a face or close a face or move the ball back or forward in my stance. But there never seemed to be this notion that you had to make perfect contact. I think that's one thing is a lot of these instructors, and I would say there are some guys like James Seekman that have been dedicated to trying to help players chip. And I remember watching Seekman, who I respect a lot. He spent a lot of time with Seve. James Seekman had a brother, Tom, that played the tour with us. And Seekman has broken down this, what he calls the finesse part of the game, not power. And then there's a different sequence. And I didn't know this stuff. I never understood what that meant. And I got chipping yips listening to all this instruction. I'm like, oh my gosh, if I have an uphill lie, I don't have to use a 60 degree. I can't play it back in my stance. I started thinking about how much I had to open the face when I was as good as anybody in the world with that part of the game. I didn't know that. I didn't think about that. I saw a trajectory. I saw a shot. I think the lie predetermines or dictates so many of the things you can do. But I didn't worry about contact. I never worried about that. Now, with this epidemic of chipping, is that because you see better agronomy or tighter conditions, different mowing patterns around greens than you see on fairways? This idea of options through architecture, to create chipping areas, and those chipping areas seems to be putting areas from off the green, not chipping areas. The different grasses, the Bermuda strands have changed, but for me, it's a lot like when you teach putting. I think a lot of times players chip better when they don't use their sand wedge, when they use less loft. They chip better when their eyes are closed, when you're not ball contact oriented or swing oriented. And you would think that now in any part of the game. I think routine's really important. I love this idea that I constantly use with players called continuous motion, and where there's no checklist you're counting down. There's no time when you're stopped or still or stationary before you go. And I have a great video of Seve hitting a chip shot, and then he's walking in to hit this shot, and his eyes are focused out there, what he's seeing the ball doing. And even as he gets to the ball, and he's putting his club down behind the ball, it's like his eyes are never looking down. They're always looking up. And then once he starts going, he might have taken a little swing, practice swing. He never has anything stop. He actually pushes forward with his body. And I think you got to generate some more movement in some of these situations rather than, it looks like grip pressure tightens, people forget to breathe. And I see that as really the biggest culprit.
Man, there's some gold there. We talk a lot about don't anticipate contact. You've got to swing, especially with these little tight lies. And, real quick follow up on that. What do you think about the equipment changes? We've talked a lot about, like, your generation grew up with a spinny ball and spinny wedges, and now the ball doesn't on those soft, you can't spin a 30-yarder anymore like you used to. We could suck it back from 30, 40 yards at times. Do you think that's played a role in this?
Without a doubt. I felt like you could hold on to a Bellata ball a lot longer on the face, even when the faces were 56, not 60. The softer feel or cover has certainly made it easier. I think a good player would always tell you they felt like they could swing pretty hard and not have the ball go off too fast or too quick. We can explain that better now with technology or smash factors, right? You can swing the club pretty hard and hit it off the toe, lessen your smash factor. The toe still has the same grooves that the center of the face has, but there's less mass behind the ball, so you use some spinny chips. And Phil was great at that. I love this guy Abraham Answer. I think he's tremendous around the greens with his little wedge shots. That's fun to watch. Matthew Fitzpatrick's another guy I admire around the greens. So yeah, that's been a big part of that for sure. And I still think what players need to do, and maybe the last thing we talk about, how when Max Homa won at Riviera a month ago in the playoff against Finau, in that second playoff hole on 10, he drove it up against that palm tree and really had no shot, but he had to create something by turning that face way over and swinging way out to the right, zipping the ball close to his toes just to get it on the green. And we see players now practice on a practice fairway with perfect lies, hitting straight shots. But I would teach, look, we got to explore boundaries or explore limits and what you can do. And, who did it better than Justin Thomas on the 16th hole off that tee shot with that drive, that low hook and drive? It looked like something Corey Pavin would have done or Bubba Watson can do. And then I know he got an incredibly good first bounce on his 5-wood tee shot on 18. But to see a ball curve like that and play it with that kind of movement, I just love that part of the game. And yeah, he got a lucky break, but man, it was fun to watch. And I know I spent times, Hal, on the green with players in wind, trying to hit as high as you can into the wind with a 5-iron, as low as you can, hook it as much as you could, slice it as much. And I think players, you need to help young players with their golf math or their golf IQ. Players sometimes don't think that it's easier to hook a 9-iron than it is to slice a 9-iron. It's easier to slice a 3-iron than it is to hook a 3-iron. I mean, learning stuff like that is impressive or important. But I played with Fred Couples at the Buick Open one year when he won, and he hit his second shot into the left trees on 16. This is on Sunday. And he really didn't have a shot to the green, but he took a 9-iron, towed it in, looked like 45 degrees, and made this swing. And the ball didn't fly more than 50 yards, but it hooked like 20. And he hit this low hooking, rolling ball that I said, oh my gosh, I got to learn that shot. And if he hadn't done that in practice, there's no way he does it on the course.
Well, we just described the new 15th club. It's called Imagination.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Definitely.
Brad, I want to thank you for being on here. You've given the listeners some valuable information. You've been a longtime friend. I respect your game. I respect you as a person. Thanks for coming on.
Al, it's been a pleasure. I love what you stand for so many of the players and people really in the world, and how you honor integrity. And when people talk about Hal Sutton, I would say more integrity than many ever met. So thank me on the podcast, and Chase, good seeing you as well.
Thank you, Brad. Really appreciate it.
Well, Chase, Brad was awesome, wasn't he?
He sure was, man. There was a lot of really good stuff. I loved the end. I found myself nodding just the whole time, talking about chipping yips and putting yips and imagination, and it's a lot of the stuff we preach here.
Well, that's why I want to bring on a lot of my peers, the people that I played against all the time, because we didn't have all of the information that people have available today. And, you hear this term all the time, we dug it out of the dirt.
Yep.
We did. We dug it out of the dirt. Trial and error, shot. We'd watch the ball. Okay, this didn't work. Let's try this. You hear Brad talk about this often, about trying different shots. And that's something that I try to deliver to everybody out there. Don't be afraid to try things.
Yep. I loved what he talked about, using small muscles in short game. Like, that's one of the big things that I try and preach, and I'm a fan of. I think this big muscle this goal to take out all the feel and the intricate part of our hands and our fingers when we're hitting little soft pitches, I think is just really difficult to do. I think it's fine hitting full 7-irons that way, but again, go write your name on the chalkboard and try and do it with your big muscles and see how good you can be.
Well, I hate to bring this up. I owe a lot to this guy, Jimmy Ballard, who I worked with quite a bit. He used to talk about big muscles never fail us in the when the pressure hits us. And I would say, I don't see anybody using this big muscle approach in their short game. And he said, it's the same swing. And I argued with him all the time. It's not the same swing. I don't care what anybody says. It's not the same swing. And here's what I'm going to tell you all today. This ain't got anything to do with past teachings or anything else. Be you, whoever that is. And if you feel the shot, whatever you do to feel the shot, continue to develop that feel. You heard that today out of Brad Faxon.
Yep.
And this is really important for everybody. Develop your feel.
Yep.
I mean, speed, whenever I'm reading a putt, looking at a putt, I'm deciding how hard I'm going to hit it, how much energy and force I'm going to use before I ever choose the break line.
Yep.
And one of the other things you heard today was mindset. We talked a lot about mindset, about, it's hard if you become a real conservative player. It's hard to shift gears back into the aggressive type of play.
Yep.
So, great nuggets on there today out of Brad. Really thankful that Brad was on the podcast today.
Absolutely.
And,
he talked a little bit about not being too stationary on short shots and not being too, we talk about this a lot, not being too, don't anticipate contact. Like I loved that idea. And going back to the imagination, like, don't be afraid to be flexible. Don't be afraid to try things. You trying to hit new shots isn't going to ruin your game. You're just going to, again, develop new tools and put new tools in your toolbox for you to be able to try under pressure and use when you need them down the line.
So one of the things that you and I have been talking about, and we didn't need Brad to emphasize this point, data. The world is full of data right now.
Yep.
And, we're trying to figure out the best use of data. How can we use it to our advantage but not be glued to it?
Yep.
And, I don't know that Chase and I have exactly figured this out yet, but here's what I would tell you. Continue to try different things. Brad made mention in there that when he was practicing his putting, and Scotty Cameron and him figured out that his path went back and he kind of looped it outside and back. And I almost said on there, so did your left to right breakers get better whenever you finally got the arc to your putting? Because I guarantee you, if you take that putter back to the inside on an arc, that left to right putter gets hard. That left to right putt gets harder to make. That right to left putt gets easier to make.
Yep.
These are things that I don't know if y'all are thinking about it out there or not, but one of the things that Brad talked about is time. That's what he would tell everybody. They need more time. See, that's what we did. Chase, myself, Brad, Peter Jacobson that we had on last week. We took the time to learn all of these different things. And us telling you about it will help. It'll bring it to the forefront of your mind. But there's no substitute to you actually taking the time and going out there and experiencing this yourself.
That's exactly right. There's really no quick fixes.
There's no quick fixes.
No, there just isn't. And yeah, a putter change can help you for a couple rounds, but it's just not going to be a life-changing change, right? Like it just takes more skill, more time to develop that skill. I thought that was so good.
Well, the other thing that Brad said, we talked about whether you're born or not.
Yep.
And it was offensive, and he pointed that out. I mean, we didn't say it to him, were you
Correct.
born a good putter?
Yeah.
He spent time developing that. And, I was kind of known as a really good iron player, but I wasn't born that way. I mean, I spent hours and hours and hours developing that. Yeah. You hear me talk about it a lot. Don't forsake your strength in order to make your weakness stronger. Make sure your strength, you can always count on that, whatever that is. And so you can't just stop working on your strength.
Correct. Let's segue a little bit to it was Players Championship week last week. Obviously, great tournament, lots of drama coming down. The last on Sunday, the last round. Talk a little bit about Lee Westwood's resurrection. I call it resurrection. I mean, he hadn't done a whole lot the last couple of years, and then to be in the final group the last 2 days at 47, or last two tournaments at 47s, is pretty cool.
It is cool. I'm pulling for the old guys all the time. The older I get, the more I want to see an old guy do it. But Lee's kept his body in shape, and he's worked on his golf swing. Obviously, he's kind of got an interesting golf swing. It's way different. His left arm is real soft at impact, and he got wayward in the last round. He really didn't hit it that good in the last round, but he hung in there. He stayed really, he fought hard.
Yep.
And, I mentioned in this podcast a little bit of what I see happening out there is nobody really aimed it at the flag on 17, and if I would, I'm not taking away from Lee's girlfriend being his caddy or anything, but, when you're doing it all on your own and you're basically your caddy and your everything, one of the things that they talk about in Lee's career is he hadn't won a major and he hadn't won a lot in the United States, and boom, it's right here. It's ready. Do you want it?
Right.
And he hit it over in the middle of the green. And, is it money that you need? No, not really. You don't need the money. You need the win. You need the win. I would have probably reminded Lee of that. If I'd have been on the bag and his caddy, I'd have said, let's win this tournament, man. Look at that flag. Go right at that flag.
Do you think that there's, this social media age we're in, do you think there's something in the back of the players' minds that say, man, if I go at the flag and I faint it in the water, people are going to say I'm a choker. People are going to say, do you think that played a role in it? Or do they even, from a playing perspective, even when I was on the mini tours and stuff, again, didn't play at the level you played at, but I found myself never really thinking about the money at that point. It was more so okay, I'm a little worried about that pin over there on the right side. There's not much room over there. I'm going to aim left and just kind of hit it. Try and if it cuts, great. If it doesn't, I'm safe.
I think that's human nature for everybody to feel that way. If I told you I didn't feel that way at times, that would be a lie.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, and we talked about it, Brad and I did on this, we all have moments where the truth is right now. I'm fixing to be defined by this. Yeah. To me, more importantly than the rest of the world. I'll give you, for instance, in my career, I'd lost a 6-shot lead at Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah.
And then took a week off and go to the PGA at Riviera, and I'm playing unbelievable. Got a 4-shot lead going into the 12th hole of the last round over Nicklaus, and I bogeyed 12, 13, and 14. And I will never, ever forget putting my head in the towel and saying, Hal, you have got to pull this together because you will be defined as a choker if you continue to do this. And what I was really talking about was not defined to the rest of the world. I had to prove this to me because this was the beginning of my career, not the end of my career.
Right.
And I needed to know that I could be successful. I could pull myself back together. We all have those defining moments where it's now or never. And that was one of those now or never moments. And it's not whether what I said, what the world said. I'll give you, for instance, Bryson DeChambeau is not caring what anybody else says about his next move. Not social media, and he's turned everybody's head. Tiger Woods did not care.
Yep, correct. I'll be honest with you, I was a little surprised he didn't aim right at the right edge of the green there and sling a little wedge in there. I was surprised at that, and that ball started left, and he might have pulled it. Again, we don't know. Again, you got to have a game plan. You've got to commit to the shot, and then you've got to accept the results.
If he pulled it because of his fear.
Yeah.
And
it's a hard shot.
It's a hard shot, but it's a wedge.
Yeah.
It's a wedge. And I can tell you right now, most people are not aiming away from something with a wedge.
Right.
So, the tour's done this to a lot of us.
Yeah.
Is because they're playing for so much money there.
Right.
And, money spends.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Man, there's some really, really good stuff there. That was an awesome interview with Brad, and we really appreciate him coming on. Hal, take us out.
Y'all follow us on social media. Here we are telling you to follow us, and I'm saying we don't pay attention to it, but we all do, because Chase and I are really trying to give you all some good things here. We mean this. I started into this because I wanted to let y'all know what I knew. And let me tell you, by saying this, I don't know everything. I'm still learning, as you are too. And that's why Chase and I are doing this. We're trying to help y'all. So follow us on social media. If there's something you want us to cover going forward, let us know. We want to deliver what y'all want. See you next time.
Be the right club today. Yes!